In 2006, one company put two flavors of bottled sweet tea on American store shelves. By 2015, 9 years later, those same shelves were generating $1 billion in annual retail sales. That is not a typo. $1 billion. From a standing start, 0 to $1 billion. 9 years. In the ready-to-drink tea category that was already being contested by Arizona Iced Tea, Lipton, Nestea, Pure Leaf, and dozens of regional competitors operating for decades before Gold Peak Tea existed. The numbers behind that achievement are not marketing projections. They are documented financial disclosures announced by Coca-Cola's chief executive officer to analysts and investors, backed by Nielsen data and independent retail measurement. Gold Peak drove nearly 30% of all dollar growth in the entire United States ready-to-drink tea category in 2014 alone. Not 30% of its own growth. 30% of the entire category in a single year by a brand that was 9 years old. By 2023, United States sales had risen 17.5% to $558 million in the 52 weeks ending May of that year. The brand had outlasted Nestea. It had outlasted Honest Tea. It had survived 3 separate class action lawsuits. It had survived a formula change, a packaging change, a rebrand, a global pandemic. The brand that started with sweet tea and unsweetened black tea in a glass bottle is today the anchor of one of the largest beverage companies on Earth's entire North American tea strategy. And yet the industry it dominates is contracting. The consumers who built it are drinking less of it. The competition it faces in 2025 looks nothing like the competition it faced in 2006. And the forces bearing down on every sweetened, ready-to-drink tea brand in America are building toward a reckoning that no amount of Coca-Cola's distribution muscle can fully absorb. Welcome inside the true story of Gold Peak Tea, the billion-dollar brand that conquered Texas tea culture, rewrote the rules of the bottled beverage category, and now faces the hardest market it has ever encountered. Walk through any diner in Texas in the year 2000, and the answer to the question, "What do you want to drink?" was not complicated. The answer was tea. Specifically, it was sweet tea. Black tea brewed at double strength, sweetened while still hot, so the sugar dissolved fully into the liquid, chilled until it was almost cold enough to hurt your teeth, and poured into a glass the size of a small bucket over ice that was already melting in the afternoon heat. This was not a regional preference in the sense that craft beer is a regional preference. Sweet tea in Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and the Carolinas was a biological necessity. The primary thermal management tool of people who spent large portions of their lives in outdoor temperatures that regularly exceeded 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The table wine of the South, food historians called it, the nectar of the region. In Texas restaurants, if you ordered tea, you received sweet tea. You had to specifically request unsweetened. The presumption was always sweetness. The ready-to-drink bottled tea category in 2005 was approximately $2 billion annually in the United States. It was dominated by Arizona Iced Tea, the New York-based company that had built its brand on large cans and low price points. Lipton held significant share through the Pepsi-Lipton joint venture. Nestea had been in the Coca-Cola distribution system since 1992. Snapple occupied the premium flavor end. Pure Leaf from PepsiCo was gaining traction at the refrigerated section. What nobody had done was build a bottled tea brand specifically and explicitly around the Southern sweet tea tradition, the home-brewed glass on the back porch, the grandmother's recipe, the specific flavor memory of an ice-cold glass on a summer afternoon. The major brands competed on price, flavor variety, and distribution. None of them competed on authenticity. None of them claimed to taste like what your grandmother brewed. In the boardrooms of Atlanta, somebody noticed, and by 2006, the notice had become a product. And the product had become one of the most consequential beverage launches in the history of a company that had been launching beverages for 120 years. The numbers that followed were, by any reasonable standard, extraordinary. But here's what the ledgers were already showing even before the first bottle went to market. The category was growing 4 times faster than the overall non-alcoholic ready-to-drink beverage market. Whoever captured the Southern authenticity position first was going to capture something enormous. The 2006 launch of Gold Peak Tea was, by Coca-Cola's later admission, the last major new brand the company would introduce until AHA Sparkling Water in 2019. 13 years between significant brand launches. In a company that had been adding brands to its portfolio continuously since the 1980s through acquisition and development, the 13-year gap between Gold Peak and AHA is a measure of how seriously the original launch was taken and how precisely it was executed. The brand launched with two varieties, sweet tea and unsweetened tea, both in glass bottles. The glass was not accidental. In the sweet tea culture that Gold Peak was explicitly targeting, the glass bottle communicated something that plastic could not. This was a premium product, not a commodity. The original liquid was made from tea concentrate, a production approach that allowed for large-scale consistency and shelf stability, but would later become a point of competitive vulnerability. The initial target consumer was documented with unusual precision. Gold Peak tea buyers were predominantly female, between the ages of 25 and 49, in households of more than 3 members, including children under 18. These buyers prioritized family. They entertained at home. They barbecued. They cooked for fun. They were, in demographic terms, the precise audience for a product whose marketing tagline would become, "The taste that brings you home." A phrase that landed with particular resonance in a Southern consumer who associated iced tea with family gathering, with summer, with the specific comfort of a beverage that tasted like it had been made by someone who cared. By 2008, Gold Peak had already begun posting double-digit growth. The scale was still small by Coca-Cola standards, but the trajectory was unmistakable. In 2009, two things happened simultaneously. First, the brand launched its chilled variety, a refrigerated section product in 59 and 89-ounce multi-serve bottles, designed for the consumer who wanted to take Gold Peak home and pour it into glasses for the family the way they would have poured pitcher-brewed sweet tea in previous generations. Second, the Gold Peak unsweetened black tea won the Chef's Best Award for Best Taste in its category, a blind evaluation by certified culinary professionals assessing aroma, texture, balance, and aftertaste. The award was not a marketing stunt. It was a third-party verification that the product being sold was genuinely excellent. The Chef's Best Award became one of the most prominent elements of Gold Peak's early marketing. It validated the brand's central claim, not just that this tasted like home-brewed tea, but that it tasted better than the alternatives, with the authority of independent professional evaluation. The numbers that would follow over the next 5 years confirmed that the market agreed. But here's the thing that nobody wanted to name out loud in those early years. The original liquid was not home-brewed. It was concentrate-based, and the gap between the claim and the production method was going to matter. 24 consecutive quarters of double-digit growth. That is what Coca-Cola chairman Muhtar Kent reported to analysts in April of 2013. 6 full years, every single quarter without exception, from the brand's 2006 launch through the first quarter of 2013, growing by double digits. In the language of large-format consumer packaged goods companies, double-digit growth for a brand the size Gold Peak had become by 2013 is extraordinary. It is the kind of sustained performance that earns a brand internal resources, shelf space investment, marketing budget, and the attention of executives who are constantly being asked to explain why the next quarter's results should be expected to match the previous quarter's results. By 2013, Kent told analysts that Gold Peak was rapidly on its way to becoming a $1 billion brand. The category context made the achievement even more significant. The ready-to-drink tea market had grown substantially since 2006, and Gold Peak was not growing in spite of that market expansion. It was driving it. The brand was by several measures the primary engine of category growth in the United States. The competitive response to Gold Peak's emergence had been substantial. Every major beverage company with tea exposure had invested in improving their ready-to-drink offerings. PepsiCo's Pure Leaf, which launched as a real brewed premium-positioned alternative, was among the most direct competitive responses to what Gold Peak had demonstrated was possible. Pure Leaf did not use concentrate. It used whole tea leaves, steeped in the manner of home brewing, and its positioning challenged Gold Peak precisely where Gold Peak had built its brand, on the claim of authenticity. By 2014, Gold Peak had launched its first national advertising campaign, national television, outdoor, print, digital, and social media. The full deployment of Coca-Cola's marketing infrastructure behind a still-growing brand. The campaign drove the 30% of all category dollar growth figure that the company would report for 2014. The number was not just impressive, It was an announcement. Then something nobody wanted to name out loud was about to surface. A competitor had built a product that was more authentically what Gold Peak claimed to be, and consumers who paid close attention were beginning to notice the difference. The number came on February 5, 2015. Coca-Cola announced that Gold Peak Tea had joined the company's roster of billion-dollar brands, the rarefied category of products generating more than $1 billion in annual retail sales globally. The announcement placed Gold Peak alongside Coca-Cola, Diet Coke, Sprite, Fanta, Powerade, Minute Maid, Simply, and a dozen other products that had taken decades to reach the milestone. Gold Peak reached it in 9 years. For context, Fanta was introduced in Germany in 1941 and distributed globally over decades. Sprite was launched in 1961 and built over 50 years. Gold Peak launched in 2006. 9 years. Billion-dollar status. Coca-Cola CEO Muhtar Kent announced the milestone alongside the news that Foo's Tea, an international tea brand Coca-Cola had developed, had also crossed the billion-dollar threshold in the remarkable time of 3 years. Together, the two brands confirmed Coca-Cola's strategy of building its own tea brands after the end of its Nestea partnership with Nestle in 2012. The Nestle partnership had distributed Nestea through Coca-Cola's bottling system since 1992. When it ended, Coca-Cola was exposed in its own distribution system, and Gold Peak was the answer. Jeff Henry, Group Director of the Tea Portfolio at Coca-Cola North America, described Gold Peak's consumer retention data in terms that beverage industry analysts noted as exceptional. Gold Peak has one of the best conversion rates in the category, which means once a consumer tries it, they come back and buy it again. That retention number mattered. In a category where consumer promiscuity, trying new brands, switching on price or flavor novelty, was the rule rather than the exception. A high conversion and retention brand had the kind of commercial durability that justified continued investment, rather than the defensive spending that characterized brands fighting for shelf position. By this point, something was already visible to anyone who looked. The premium end of the ready-to-drink tea market was shifting away from concentrate-based production and toward real brewed formulas. Pure Leaf was growing on exactly that positioning, and Gold Peak, despite the Chef's Best Award, despite the authenticity marketing, was still using concentrate. In 2018, Gold Peak did something that its marketing had always implied, but its production had never delivered. It switched to real brewed tea. The transition moved Gold Peak's manufacturing from concentrate-based production, in which tea extract was mixed with water and other ingredients at bottling, to actual brewing, steeping whole tea leaves in filtered water, exactly as a consumer would brew tea at home, at scale. The brewing was done at Coca-Cola's existing juice production facilities, large plants already equipped with the food-grade brewing and temperature-controlled processing equipment that tea production required. At the same time, Coca-Cola upgraded the leaf sourcing to premium tea leaves from Kenya's Rift Valley, high-altitude East African black tea with a specific flavor profile that tea professionals consistently associated with premium quality, the same origin that had won the original Chef's Best Award evaluations. The transition was completed by 2019, when Coca-Cola confirmed that Gold Peak was fully non-concentrate, fully real brewed, and that the formula had been updated to use cane sugar rather than processed sweeteners in the sweet tea varieties. The commercial rationale was direct. Pure Leaf had been growing aggressively on the real brewed positioning. Consumers who described themselves as tea truists, people who valued the specific taste experience of tea actually brewed from leaves rather than reconstituted from concentrate, were directing their purchasing toward brands that could credibly claim genuine brewing. Gold Peak's marketing had always made authenticity claims. Now the production matched them. In June of 2021, Coca-Cola formally rebranded the product as Gold Peak Real Brewed Tea. The packaging was redesigned to highlight the golden color of the brewed liquid, emphasize the natural tea leaf imagery, and introduce a logo with subtle leaf-like serifs that visually communicated the brewing process. The campaign supporting the rebrand was titled Front Yard Family. 60-second television spots showing unfiltered family moments, mother attacking children with a garden hose, backyard chaos, the kind of domestic warmth that had always been Gold Peak's emotional territory, now updated with the explicit declaration that what was in the bottle was genuinely, verifiably real. The rebrand campaign coincided with the COVID-19 pandemic's retail phase. the period during which consumers who had stopped going to restaurants were stocking their home refrigerators with ready-to-drink beverages at rates that the major brands had not anticipated. Gold Peak's multi-serve carafes, the 59-ounce and 89-ounce refrigerated bottles designed for families, saw particularly strong growth. The brand that had been positioning itself as the tea you bring home was suddenly selling in record quantities to families who had nowhere else to go. But here's what the production numbers were already showing. Supply chain problems had made it impossible to meet consumer demand for Gold Peak during the same period, a fact that would play a direct role in a major strategic decision that Coca-Cola was about to make about its entire tea portfolio. The legal challenges arrived in 3 distinct waves, each targeting a different aspect of Gold Peak's product claims, each revealing a gap between what the marketing communicated and what the product contained or delivered. The first suit was filed in July 2017. The case, Nasseri et al. v. The Coca-Cola Company and Coca-Cola Refreshments USA, Inc., case number 17-CV 4033, filed in the Eastern District of New York, alleged that Gold Peak tea products were deceptively marketed as having no preservatives when they in fact contained citric acid, phosphoric acid, and ascorbic acid, which the plaintiffs characterized as well-known preservatives commonly used in commercial food and drink products. The plaintiff, a New York consumer, argued that Coca-Cola had exploited consumers' preference for beverages without preservatives in violation of New York State consumer protection laws. The complaint ran 204 pages. Coca-Cola's position was that the cited acids functioned primarily as flavoring agents and pH regulators, not as preservatives in the conventional sense. The legal distinction between a substance that incidentally extends shelf life as a secondary effect of its primary function and a substance added specifically to preserve the product is genuinely contested in food law. The case was among a wave of similar natural and no preservatives labeling lawsuits that swept through the beverage industry in the 2010s, as consumer expectations for ingredient transparency sharpened. The second lawsuit arrived in August 2019, also in federal court. A California consumer named David G. alleged that Coca-Cola's 18 fluid-ounce Gold Peak tea bottles were deliberately designed with a concave bottom, a design that made the bottle appear to hold more liquid than it actually contained. The plaintiff argued that he could not see the concave area while shopping, and therefore could not comparison shop on a per-ounce basis. The Gold Peak tea lawsuit said Coca-Cola was aware of packaging regulations and chose to violate them. The third case was filed in February 2020, case number 20 CV-711, Eastern District of New York, Salerno et al. The Coca-Cola Company. The plaintiff alleged that the slightly sweet Gold Peak variety, marketed with the claim sweetened with 50% less sugar than our original sweet tea, was misleadingly labeled. The product contained 24 grams of added sugar per bottle, making sugar the second most predominant ingredient. The lawsuit argued that the phrase slightly sweetened led consumers to believe the product was low in sugar, a claim the FDA had never formally approved for use on product labels. In August 2021, United States District Judge Nelson S. Roman dismissed the Salerno case. The judge found that the term slightly sweet was a subjective taste descriptor, not a nutritional claim, and that the calorie count and full nutrition facts panel on the label provided consumers with accurate information. No reasonable consumer, the ruling stated, would think otherwise. But lawsuits, even dismissed ones, accumulate in the public record. And what each of these 3 suits documented was a brand operating at the friction point between premium authenticity claims and the actual complexity of mass production beverage manufacturing. On May 23, 2022, Coca-Cola made an announcement that revealed the full scope of its strategic bet on Gold Peak. The company announced that it would discontinue the Honest Tea product line by the end of 2022. Honest Tea, the Bethesda, Maryland organic tea brand that Seth Goldman and Barry Nailbuff had founded in 1998, that Goldman had described at the time of discontinuation as the business he had built from scratch, had been one of Coca-Cola's most prestigious natural channel brands, since the company acquired a 40% stake in 2008 for $43 million and full ownership in 2011 for an undisclosed sum. Honest Tea had reached revenues of more than $500 million in 2018. It had grown double digits for years. Goldman had described its potential to join the billion-dollar club, and Coca-Cola was cutting it. Sabrina Tandon, group director of ready-to-drink tea at Coca-Cola's North America operating unit, stated the rationale plainly. Moving from a 3-brand tea portfolio to a prioritized 2-brand lineup, Gold Peak and Peace Tea, would free up investment resources and supply chain capacity to better meet consumer needs and capture share in the category. There was also a direct supply chain disclosure. Ongoing supply chain challenges mean we are having to prioritize production and distribution of certain product SKUs, and that we've been unable to meet consumer demand for Gold Peak. This, among other factors, helped drive this very difficult decision. The company was not able to make enough Gold Peak to meet consumer demand, and it was eliminating one of its most prestigious tea brands to create the supply chain capacity to make more of it. This was the clearest possible statement of how important Gold Peak had become to Coca-Cola's North American beverage strategy. The brand that had hit $1 billion in 9 years was now the anchor of the company's entire tea category. Honest Tea, with its organic credentials, its fair trade sourcing, its dedicated natural channel consumer base, its founders' public grief, was sacrificed to Gold Peak's commercial priority. Goldman called it a gut punch. Tandon noted that Gold Peak had endless runway. The numbers told the story of which brand Coca-Cola believed would survive the next decade of market pressure. But what nobody said publicly in those announcements was what the ready-to-drink tea category data was already beginning to show. The dollar figures tell one story about Gold Peak. The volume figures tell another. In the 52 weeks ending May of 2023, Gold Peak's United States retail sales rose 17.5% to $558 million. That is a strong number by any conventional measure. In the same period, the ready-to-drink tea category as a whole posted dollar sales gains. But analysts at Mintel, who examined the category data more carefully, identified the mechanism behind the gains. Tea's posted dollar growth was a result of price increases amid a climate in which consumers are drinking less tea, according to the Mintel report entitled Tea and RTD United States for 2024. Consumers were paying more per bottle, they were buying fewer bottles. Volume was declining while dollar sales increased. The category was technically growing in revenue terms and contracting in physical consumption terms simultaneously. This is the structural warning that every premium consumer goods brand dreads. Price increases can sustain revenue figures while unit volumes fall, but only to a point. When price elasticity is reached, when the consumer decides the bottle costs more than the thirst is worth, the revenue decline follows the volume decline down, with no lag. In 2024, Arizona Iced Tea, which had deliberately held its price lower than competitors, was the top-selling ready-to-drink tea brand in the United States, with sales exceeding $1 billion. Pure Leaf was second at approximately $976 million. Lipton was third at approximately $601 million. Gold Peak was competing in this field, but its specific position in the ranking data available publicly placed it below brands that had been in the market for decades longer. The sugar reduction trend was also hitting the sweet tea category with particular force. The beverage industry analyst BMC's Dilworth said explicitly in the trade press that sugar reduction trends have caused some consumers to exit the category altogether in favor of PET water, sparkling water, and functional beverages. The consumers leaving the sweet tea category were not switching to other tea brands. They were leaving tea entirely. Here is what the silence in that boardroom meant. The consumer who built Gold Peak on sweet tea with real cane sugar was being advised by their doctor, their nutritionist, their food app, and their social media algorithm that the product in their refrigerator was a meaningful source of added sugar in their diet, and they were listening. Arizona Iced Tea sold more than $1 billion of ready-to-drink tea in 2024. Its signature 23-ounce can, the iconic tall boy with the decorative label, sold at a retail price point that has been held at 99 cents at most convenience store locations for decades, is one of the most recognizable packages in American retail. Arizona's commercial model is fundamentally different from Gold Peak's. Arizona competes on price and volume. Gold Peak competes on quality and premium positioning. Arizona has never tried to be a premium brand. Gold Peak has never tried to be a value brand. These are different strategies for different consumers in different purchase contexts. The problem is that the market of 2025 places a specific kind of pressure on premium positioning that the market of 2015 did not. In 2015, the consumer who paid a premium for Gold Peak's Real Brewed story was doing so in an economic environment where premium positioning in food and beverages was broadly valued and broadly affordable. In 2024 and 2025, that same consumer was managing household budgets that had absorbed years of food and beverage price inflation across every category simultaneously. Mintel's analysis noted explicitly that brands must avoid alienating shoppers through continued price hikes, especially considering they're lukewarm on their enjoyment of tea taste. Lukewarm on their enjoyment of tea taste. That phrase, buried in a trade report, is one of the most alarming data points in the category's recent history. It does not say that consumers hate tea. It says that the premium they once assigned to tea's health halo, its authenticity story, its Southern cultural resonance, that premium is eroding. The refrigerated ready-to-drink tea brands, Milo's in particular, which grew by 19% in 2024, demonstrate that freshness and cold chain positioning can command premium price and premium growth simultaneously. Milo's is brewed in Alabama. Its geographic distribution is constrained by the logistics of cold chain delivery. Its growth is real but regionally bounded. Gold Peak, by contrast, is a national ambient brand competing on the shelf against ambient brands in a consumer environment where health consciousness, price sensitivity, and category skepticism are all moving in the wrong direction at the same time. But what was already visible in the data was a move Coca-Cola had been quietly making, and it was going to define Gold Peak's next chapter. The launch of Gold Peak Zero Sugar Sweet Tea represented Coca-Cola's most direct acknowledgement of the health consciousness pressure bearing down on the brand's core sweet tea franchise. Zero sugar. The same brewed leaf formula. The same authentic taste positioning. No calories, no added sugar. Sweetened with a blend of stevia and aspartame that the food scientists had been calibrating to approximate the specific sweetness profile of Gold Peak's cane sugar original. The rationale was straightforward. If the consumers exiting the sweet tea category were leaving because of sugar concerns rather than taste concerns, and the category data suggested both were happening simultaneously, a credible zero-sugar alternative kept those consumers inside the Gold Peak brand rather than losing them to sparkling water or functional beverages entirely. The zero-sugar sweet tea joined a portfolio that had been expanding steadily since 2009. The launch history of Gold Peak's product line reads as a near-continuous response to shifting consumer preferences. Diet tea in 2011, green tea in 2014, Georgia peach tea, California raisin raspberry tea, Maine blueberry tea, the lemonade tea variant, a zero-calorie line, the slightly sweet positioning targeted at consumers who wanted the tea experience with less sweetness than the original. Each edition was a response to a specific consumer signal. Each represented an attempt to expand Gold Peak's relevance beyond the core Southern sweet tea drinker who had bought the brand's first bottles in 2006. By 2025, the brand had more than a dozen active varieties across refrigerated and ambient formats. Multiple package sizes from individual 18.5-ounce bottles to 76-ounce multi-serve containers. The breadth of the portfolio was simultaneously a strength and a strategic complexity. A 13-plus variety portfolio requires significant retail shelf space, manufacturing scheduling across multiple production lines, and marketing investment distributed across multiple products rather than concentrated on a single flagship. The original Gold Peak Sweet Tea, the product that drove the billion-dollar milestone, remained the brand's core, but it was now one of many rather than the singular expression of a focused brand. The refrigerated Milo's was growing by 19% in the same period. Milo's had one product: regional, focused, cold. The contrast between the two brands' trajectories in the 2024 data was not a coincidence. The most durable competitive advantage Gold Peak possesses is not its formula. It is not its branding. It is not even the authenticity of its real brewed production. It is the distribution system through which the product reaches the consumer. Coca-Cola Beverages Canada, and its American equivalent through the North American Bottling Network, operates manufacturing and distribution infrastructure across the United States at a scale that no ready-to-drink tea brand operating independently can match. When Coca-Cola decides to place a product in American retail, it goes everywhere, simultaneously. From gas stations in rural Texas to grocery chains in New York City to vending machines in corporate office buildings. The distribution is total. This is why Gold Peak's growth from 2006 to 2015 was possible in the first place. A genuinely superior product distributed through the most extensive beverage network in the world, targeted at an underserved consumer who had been waiting for exactly this product. That combination drives double-digit growth for 24 consecutive quarters. The formula, the story, and the distribution were all aligned simultaneously. The distribution advantage has not gone away. Gold Peak in 2025 occupies more retail shelf positions than any competitive ready-to-drink tea brand. Because Coca-Cola's relationships with retail buyers, its category management expertise, and its ability to co-promote Gold Peak alongside Coca-Cola, Sprite, Powerade, and the rest of the portfolio give it leverage that standalone brands cannot replicate. But distribution advantage is structural. It can place the product on the shelf. It cannot make a consumer choose it over Arizona's 99-cent can. It cannot make a consumer choose sweetened tea over sparkling water. It cannot reverse the sugar reduction trend reshaping the entire category. It cannot prevent Pure Leaf from occupying the adjacent premium position with a real brewed credential that is identical to Gold Peak's, but with a PepsiCo distribution system that is the only network in the country that rivals Coca-Cola's. The distribution advantage explains why Gold Peak is still in the market, and still significant. It does not explain how Gold Peak grows in a category that is contracting in volume even as it grows in dollar terms through price. In 2006, the ready-to-drink tea category in the United States was organized around three primary players: Arizona at the value end, Lipton Pepsi through the PepsiCo distribution system in the mass market, and Snapple at the premium and flavor end. Gold Peak entered the premium mainstream position that none of the existing players had fully occupied. In 2025, the category is organized differently. Arizona is still dominant and growing. Pure Leaf, the PepsiCo Real Brewed premium brand, is the number 2 brand in the category at approximately $976 million in annual sales. Milo's is growing at 19% in the refrigerated section, with a regionally constrained but highly premium cold brewed product. The store brand and private label ready-to-drink tea categories have expanded across every major grocery retailer, and the functional beverage competitors that have taken the most health-conscious tea consumers are not even tea brands. They are sparkling water, electrolyte drinks, and ready-to-drink wellness beverages that occupy the same purchase occasion as ready-to-drink tea without any of the sugar scrutiny. The market that Gold Peak helped create has become a market that challenges Gold Peak in every segment it occupies. The premium mainstream position that was vacant in 2006 is now fully occupied by Pure Leaf, by the refrigerated category leaders, and by an expanding private label tier that has been improving in quality while maintaining price advantages. The specific consumer that Gold Peak targeted in 2006, female, 25 to 49 family-oriented home entertainer, is in 2025 a consumer with dramatically more beverage choices, significantly more health awareness, and price sensitivity sharpened by years of household budget pressure. The problem was already visible to anyone who looked. The category that Gold Peak had grown for 9 years had, in the years after 2015, generated exactly the competitive response that a category this large always generates: more entrants, more investment, more options for the consumer, and systematically compressing margins for everyone. Gold Peak Real Brewed Tea in 2025 is the second largest brand in the Coca-Cola North America tea portfolio, behind Peace Tea in some measures, the primary premium mainstream anchor in others, depending on the specific retail channel and time period being measured. The company's public statements describe the brand in terms of continued investment and category leadership in mainstream iced teas without significant disruptions. The legal challenges: the 3 class action lawsuits from 2017 through 2021 were resolved or dismissed without fundamental damage to the brand's retail position. The reformulation to real brewed production in 2018 addressed the most structurally significant competitive vulnerability. The brand's sales of $558 million in the 52 weeks ending May 2023 represent the highest single-year United States retail figure publicly available. Comparable figures for subsequent periods are embedded in Coca-Cola's consolidated North America still beverage category disclosures rather than reported by brand, making precise ongoing measurement difficult. What is available is the category-level data: ready-to-drink tea dollar sales growing on price increases while volume declines. Sugar reduction trends pushing health-conscious consumers towards sparkling water and functional beverages. Refrigerated and cold chain brands capturing premium growth at the expense of ambient shelf-stable brands. In the same period, Milo's grown 19%. Arizona exceeded $1 billion. Pure Leaf reached $976 million. The market had become a three-way premium value regional structure, in which Gold Peak's position as the premium mainstream entry was being contested by Pure Leaf from above, by Arizona from below, and by Milo's from the refrigerated section. The brand that drove 30% of all dollar growth in the ready-to-drink tea category in 2014 was, by 2024, fighting to hold its position in a category that had matured, fragmented, and price-pressured its way into a structure that looked nothing like the one Gold Peak had been built for. Here is what the silence in those distribution meetings meant. Holding position in a contracting volume market while competitors grow on all sides is not a strategy. It is a condition. Return to the number at the beginning of this story. 0 to 1 billion in 9 years. It is still the fastest verified brand-building achievement in the ready-to-drink tea category's history. The 24 consecutive quarters of double-digit growth from 2006 to 2013. The 30% of all category dollar growth driven in 2014 by a brand that was 8 years old. The billion-dollar milestone announced in February of 2015, 9 years after the first sweet tea and unsweetened tea bottles went to market in glass containers with a premium label and a claim that sounded like home. That number is the beginning of this story's arithmetic. Everything that follows is the arithmetic of what the number was built on, what it has earned, and what it has cost to defend. 3 implicit lessons emerge from the Gold Peak balance sheet. The first is expressed as a production equation. Real brewed equals real claims, and real claims equals sustainable brand equity. The decision to transition from concentrate-based to whole leaf brewing in 2018 was the most commercially significant decision Gold Peak made in its second decade. It aligned the product with the marketing in a way that the original formulation never fully did. The class action suits over no preservatives and the competitive challenge from Pure Leaf's real brewed positioning were both consequences of the gap between the brand's authenticity story and its actual manufacturing process. Closing that gap cost money and production complexity. Not closing it would have cost the brand. The second is expressed as a volume equation. Dollar growth minus volume growth equals price increase times consumer anxiety. The ready-to-drink tea category's post-2020 structure, dollar gains driven by price increases, volume declining, is an equation that describes a category in which the most price-sensitive consumers are leaving and the remaining consumers are paying more for fewer bottles. For a brand whose core identity is the Southern family reaching for a pitcher of sweet tea, volume erosion is not just a financial problem. It is a brand identity problem. The family that is drinking less sweet tea is not having fewer pitchers. It is drinking sparkling water instead. The third is expressed as a competitive equation. Creating a category generates the market that creates the competition that contests the creation. Gold Peak helped create the ready-to-drink premium tea category as a credible, nationally distributed, billion-dollar proposition. That creation attracted Pure Leaf, educated consumers about real brewed standards, and eventually produced the exact competitive landscape that now challenges Gold Peak from every direction. The competition that Gold Peak faces in 2025 is partly the consequence of Gold Peak's own success in demonstrating that the category was worth competing for. From the first glass bottle on an Atlanta shelf in 2006 to the billion-dollar announcement in February of 2015, to the supply chain crisis that ended Honest Tea in 2022, to the volume decline that is reshaping the entire category in 2025, the arithmetic of Gold Peak is still being written. The final column has not yet been totaled. But the numbers that are already in the ledger tell a story that anyone who understands the beverage industry can read in their own language. The brand that conquered sweet tea culture is now in the hardest fight of its 19-year commercial life. The pitcher is on the counter. The ice is melting. The family has to decide what to pour.